Welcome in, everybody. I am checking my levels here. Who knows? I might be coming really hot into the studio. Let's make sure that that's fixed before Nick yells at me post-production and screams and yells and says, "Daggone it, Trace, you messed it up again." And that would be the usual thing. So welcome in, Chatterbox Reds, everybody. Nice to see many of you. Some of you are coming in here over from Chatterbox Bearcats. Good to see that Chuck and Houdini are getting a little bit of love. Those guys are really, really good. We're going to try to find ways in which we can implement them as much as we possibly can. Perhaps, as Nick mentioned in the chat, there might be some rumors, some rumblings that from time to time, Chuck might be able to fill in here for us on Chatterbox Reds, but that's here nor there at this current time because we got some baseball to talk about. Pitchers and catchers reported today, Nick, and it's been a long day. I got to be honest. I came downstairs, and it's something about the confines of the basement. You know, it's just like, this is actually kind of nice. I'm looking forward to this. How are you, Nick?
I'm good. We had a jam-packed day on Chatterbox today. We had Off the Bench. There was a video game stream. We had a high school basketball game, Chatterbox Bearcats. Now Chatterbox Reds. This is the place to be.
That's right. And there's a good chance we met with a golf course today. Good chance that we find ourselves covering a golf tournament at some point as well. So who knows? Chatterbox Sports, you never know what you're going to find yourself into here. All right. Got a few topics, obviously, to run down here. Chris Welsh interview. He was live from Goodyear, Arizona. There's some division previews. You had a chance. I'll let you tease that towards the end. But you had a chance to talk to a division rival. Maybe it's not a bad thing, but you have to talk to a TV guy from an opposing rival just to get their insight. Maybe we might have our blinders on here. The Cincinnati Reds, maybe they look at us a little bit differently. Let you tease that towards the end. But we have chat questions as always. And first and foremost, though, we have the Reds, some MLB news, and certainly right after that, we're going to get into the whole Soler versus Candelario because you know that's going to be the take all year long. You know that's going to come up. If Candelario plays great, it's going to be how smart Nick Krall is. If Candelario doesn't play great and Jorge Soler is hitting bombs in San Francisco, everybody in Cincinnati is going to be like, look, we could have had that guy. We could have had that guy. How you feeling, Nick? You feeling good about the offseason so far and the MLB news that surrounds, I guess, somewhat pertaining to the Reds, but more importantly, I guess, the news that just broke with Soler?
Yeah, look, it's exciting. Pitchers and catchers. I mean, I know it's not really all that big of a deal, but just the start of spring. I think once we get to like that first spring training, and that's when I really kind of feel the energy. I didn't realize how long spring training was till I did a podcast after every game last year.
That's right.
It is long, but nonetheless, look, it's exciting to get the ball rolling. And I got some news and notes. I know we haven't done a live show in a little bit. We did have a little special show last week with Seth Reese and some jerseys, but just to kind of fill people in. This was today, though, actually. Reds claim Bubba Thompson. He's just been bouncing around the DFA wire. The Reds must like something about old Bubba. I don't know if I see it, but good for them. I was a little surprised, they DFA'd Levi Stout. Moore's just surprised that they DFA'd Levi Stout for a guy they had already DFA'd. That's just, I don't know. Maybe he got to camp and they're like, yeah, this is just not going to work. I'm not really sure on that. India, of course, signing the right 2-year deal, avoiding arbitration. That was the big news of the week. Josh Harrison signing an MILB. And then the Brewers, they were a little busy. Some nice signings by them, I have to say. Not like, elite players by any means, but nice fits for them personally. Gary Sanchez, big right-handed bat that crushes left-handed pitching. And then Jacob Junis, kind of a Nick Martinez type pitcher for them that they'll be able to use in a couple different roles. Trace, any of the news of recency tickle your fancy?
No, I don't think so, man. I mean, listen, Josh Harrison, that's a cute little thing. And who knows? Maybe you just never know. I mean, Nick Martini would not have what's the term you just used? Tickle my fancy. That's an interesting one. I gotta admit, that kind of got me off my game a little bit. I was like, whoa, Nick, tickling my fancy, everybody. Anyways. What were you even talking about? You got me all disheveled here. Anyway, Harrison. If you would have said, "Hey, we got Nick Martini," I don't think that would have tickled my fancy last year at any point until he started to do Nick Martini things, and then I would have been like, "Yeah, this is great." So who knows? I'm not discounting at this point anybody. Okay, I'm going into spring training with a clean sheet. Certainly, I'm going to have perceptions of certain guys. Okay. I'm going to have perceptions of certain guys, but I'm going to try my very best to just treat everybody equal. I'm going to watch the games. I'm going to get a feel for it. I'm going to do my best to not really have any hot takes, no toxic trace for the first 2 weeks of baseball. Okay, the first 2 weeks after opening day, I'm going to let it breathe a little bit, see what we got, and then go from there. Okay, that's what I'm going to try to do. And I said this earlier, and I hope this is the case. I hope the Reds... And people will think that this is crazy and this is hot take from Trace. I hope the Reds put whoever seemingly seems to be the best player at that time on the field for the Cincinnati Reds. I think we're at that point now where we should do that. We can do that. And you know what? If Blake Dunn tears it up in spring training, I don't want this to be a Matt McClain situation. I don't want to sit here and be like, this guy looks pretty damn good, Nick. I know he hit 230 for 400 at-bats in Double-A, but I don't know. He looked like he might be the best player in spring training, and he's tearing it up in Triple-A. Maybe he should be on the big league team. And then I don't know. Magically, this team just gets a bunch of these young guys, and the next thing you know, we're fighting for a playoff spot at the end of the year, and you look back and you're like, well, they started 7-15 because we had Kevin Newman playing shortstop and Jonathan India at second. I don't know. Probably could have had some maybe better opportunities with the other guys. So that's where I'm at.
Not having Kevin Newman on the roster is just really gives you a breath of fresh air going into this spring, doesn't it? Nothing's
better. I tell you what, the only thing that I seen of Kevin Newman's that I even considered possibly keeping for the rest of my life were the fact that he had baseball cleats at Reds Fest for $10, and it wasn't because I wanted his autographed cleats. It was because they were the same size as mine, and I was thinking, you know what? Am I ever gonna have to go back on the diamond because I might be able to use some cleats, and they're only $10. But you know what? I decided not to because they were Kevin Newman's. Anyways, go ahead.
Chat, I want to know, who will Trace's Kevin Newman be this year? I am ready for some ideas. I don't want to make it a poll question because I think I want to hear everyone's opinion on this. So there's a lot of options. There's a lot of options out there.
You know what? I hate that it always turns into me always feeling like I'm ripping on him. I mean, come on, for the love of God.
He's gonna be like a 4-win player for the Diamondbacks this year.
Yeah, well. No, he won't. No, he won't. Okay? I mean, I'll tell you this. If the Diamondbacks think they're getting a 4-win player, how about this? A 1-win player out of Kevin Newman? You got something. I got some land to sell you, as they say. Anyways, I thought, but to be clear, I know you already talked on this. Most people that watch this show know ball really, really well. That's why I love the chats, because the chat actually keeps you updated. David said something earlier that Reed Mouse actually told me earlier today as well, which was that there hasn't been a Giant since Barry Bonds that have hit 30 home runs for the San Francisco Giants. I've just said Giants twice, but you get my point. It's not easy. It's not easy to hit for power out in San Francisco. Buster Posey obviously was a part of that situation after Barry Bonds left. So you'd have thought, oh, hey, didn't he hit 30? They actually, if you look back at their team, they don't really have a lot of guys that hit over 20 home runs. Now, some of that's based off the players that they've had, yes, but in general, we'll see. But that doesn't mean, I guess my point to that is, it doesn't mean that Soler wouldn't have been great in Cincinnati either, though. So if Soler would have signed with Cincinnati, we would have been fired up. But we have Candelario, and I think that there's a valid reason as to why, but I kind of want to hear your take on it first.
Yeah, look, I was all about Jorge Soler, so I mean, I'm not going to back down now. I like Candelario. I think I would have preferred Soler if it was, up to me, especially since the dollars are so eerily similar. The Reds actually paid $3 million more. I just think Soler has a lot higher upside. I feel like Candelario is definitely the safer player because if Soler doesn't hit well, there's not a whole lot of value because he can't play defense. at all. He's primarily a DH. So Candelario does give the Reds a lot more flexibility. I think what can really make me on the side of going Candelario is the right move is how they use everyone else. How do they use Jonathan India? How do they use Spencer Steer? That because the one thing I was kind of thinking, I was thinking about this kind of a lot today is, all right, I really like Soler, but if you bring Soler, then you're probably making Steer and India, one of the two, probably ends up having to play a lot more infield. Because not even like on the opening day lineup, but when there's an injury, there's not the depth. So you're going to have to shift them in. So not only would you have Soler either hogging the DH spot or being a poor defender in the corner outfield, you also have one of those two in the infield being a poor defender as well. So it's kind of like you're weakening two spots defensively. So that's where Candelario can maybe, make up that offensive lacking, or at least the power. But it'll be a fun thing to track. It's just crazy that they ended up with contracts that are so close to each other.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to mispronounce names here. I just seen it in the chat. If I can't find it, I'll give proper due in a moment. But somebody just mentioned that they could have gotten maybe both the guys. Well, the problem with that is ultimately at the end of the day, there's only so many roster spots. I think that this Reds franchise right now, they feel a little obligated, some obligation to give some of these younger guys that they kind of rushed isn't the right word, but gave opportunities last year in the big leagues, and they didn't do anything in their short time with this team to prove that they shouldn't be considered a big leaguer and they shouldn't be able to be given opportunities to be a big leaguer. And if you bring in, and listen, this is professional sports by all means. I just said play the best player. If you can get the best player, who cares at the end of the day if you get opportunities or not? If you're not one of the better players, then so be it. But I do think a guy like Spencer Steer, right, it would be really hard to get in a position where, for lack of a better term, if you went out and got Candelario and you did get Soler, and let's just say there aren't any injuries, and on top of that, even if there are some injuries in certain spots, Steer still is maybe the odd man out. And if it's not Steer, then it's Will Benson. If it's not Will Benson, then maybe it's Drake Fraley. Or if it's not, then what do you do with Jonathan India? Like, if Jonathan India would have gotten moved, right, by now, you could make the case that there's still another relatively flexible everyday spot. I put that in quotations because every day I think David Bell at this point has already said, now whether or not it's true or not is to be determined, but he's already said that, hey, he's going to try to rotate 11 guys on an everyday, day-to-day basis. But again, Soler is a guy that swings and misses a lot, but does have a lot of pop. If Christian Encarnacion Strand doesn't play up to the potential that we hope him to, I think that then we're going to start looking out in San Francisco if Soler is having a decent year, and we're going to start to be a little, not upset, but we're going to be like, we wish we had him, right? If CES is hitting 40, and I don't want to put this on him, but 40, 45, heaven forbid, 50 home runs. I know that's a little ridiculous, but I love it. Who knows? I mean, I don't know. Let's just say he does do that. Then at that point, you're just going to look at it and be like, well, we already got a DH, because more than likely, in my opinion, they're going to try to put CES at the DH spot more times than not if they're able to, if injuries don't play a factor into this, and they're going to ride with that. And I think that Candelario offers them what you had said. It offers them more flexibility than anything else. And does he have the same pop that Soler has? No. But being a guy that ultimately might not be a platoon player, and he can play first and third base. Hopefully he continues to play at an above average level. We'll see. Can we at least all admit that it's speculation at this point, one way or the other? Like, we don't really know. These guys have proven that they're big league players. The question is what do they do now?
It's also possible Soler had no interest in Cincinnati. I mean, we don't know that, but
right. Well, dollars and cents matter. Dollars and cents matter. I mean, I'm sure if the Reds offered $2 extra million per year on that contract, he'd grow to like Skyline Chili.
But I agree completely. I think CES is the gauge for really if this is probably even more than Candelaria, because if he hits for power, there's not really a great fit for Soler. I agree that I think the Reds will try to DH CES more than probably anyone else, but I would not be surprised, and I think people need to watch this early in the year. I wouldn't be surprised if the Reds DH Ellie and they DH McLean, and they DH some of these other guys, some of these younger guys more early in the year, more than you would think, just to kind of give them that like half rest day. So I think they'll be really using that DH to. I think you're going to see. I would be shocked if there's like 12 guys that play DH this year.
Yeah,
I think they'll really use that a lot and try to use that to their advantage.
they might have 12, but and I mean, I know you're not saying this, but ultimately most of it is going to lie within a few guys, and they might try to give guys day off, and next thing you know, randomly Jonathan India is DHing, and maybe based off of a matchup in a perfect world, they're going to DH Fraley, or Benson. I don't know who's better. I mean, you might know this off the top of your head, but I don't know who's better defensively, theoretically, based off the metrics. Sometimes I love Will Benson to death, but sometimes he looks like basically a baby deer out there trying to track down balls, and he catches them, most of the time. I'm not downplaying, but it doesn't look the prettiest.
Fraley is significantly better, and I think it also another good hint about how the Reds feel about this is if you look back through the game logs last year, whenever Will Benson and Jake Fraley were in the field on the same day, Fraley played right field and Benson played left field. So typically, you're going to put your better fielder in right field. But yeah, they might DH Fraley a lot too, just to kind of try to. It just has had so many injuries. Even if he is the better defender, I'd just be like, we want to DH him every couple games, so we keep him fresh, and we just, don't risk a lot, because Jake Fraley's a huge piece, just because his ability to really hit right-handed pitching. I think there's a lot of guys on this Reds roster that hit right-handed pitching well last year that I could see regressing against right-handed pitching. And that's a small concern for me going into this year. But you hope guys like Ellie, you hope CES, who's it doesn't really have any sort of splits at all. You hope just those two guys right there, their presence, and I guess Will Benson for a full season kind of make up for some of that regression from guys that you might see like McLean, Steer. Those guys hit really, really well against right-handed pitching. And that might be the one piece that I could see regressing from each of those guys.
Yeah. I know this isn't really on topic. The one situation where Harrison, may be a pretty good depth piece is just the fact of what happens if there's some guys that for lack of a better term, regress. And they regress significant enough to where you start to kind of have to give them a break or give them kind of a send them down to bring them back up type situation. Listen, sports, baseball especially, such a long season that it's hard for me to believe that really all of these rookies aren't going to go through stretches of baseball where we're going to question whether or not David Bell needs to give them a break or send them down. Hell, it happened almost last season with guys that we still were proud about at the end of the year. And Will Benson's a guy that obviously got sent down and he came back. TJ Friedel's a guy that obviously hung around for quite some time, but he had some injuries here and there. Jake Fraley's injured here and there. So it is a long season. Jake Fraley, though, as a reminder, for those that forget, probably our best hitter for most of the season until he got hurt. And then certainly he fell off a cliff. I mean, there's nothing else to say other than that. If you back out, you could do this for a lot of guys, to be fair. If you back out certain parts of the season, where you could say that Jake Fraley was hurt, I would argue that he was probably our best hitter, most consistent hitter. And, Jonathan India obviously could also at times look the part as well. But again, it comes down to consistency and are you going to be able to stay healthy? And I think even India, to a certain extent, India dropped off for a minute, but then obviously he went on the DL for quite some time. And then when he came back, he was serviceable again. So I don't know. Are you concerned about injuries much? I mean, you always mention injuries in regards to the depth, this, that, and the other, but think about all the guys last year that missed some time, right? And I'm not saying these guys need to play 162 straight games, but you could probably help me through all this right now off the top of my head. But you have Matt McLean, who obviously missed some time. You have CES, who missed some time last year, from not at the big league level per se, but at the minor league level, he missed time. Noelve Marte missed time. You have TJ Friedel, who missed time. You have Jake Fraley, who missed time. You have Jonathan Indy. I don't know if I already said him. He missed time. I could be funny here. I'm not going to try to be, but Kirk Casale missed some time. Newman had some Tums problems, as we all remember. So, and obviously the starting pitching rotation was a nightmare as well. Like, who's that on? Is that just baseball in general? Am I naive? I don't watch enough baseball to know the other kind of teams per se. But is that normal, or is this a fluke, or is there something that the Reds? And I don't want to go down that path, but is there something the Reds are doing that maybe they could not do? I don't know, but
the Reds' injury situation last year was weird because their bullpen stayed eerily healthy. Like, most teams' bullpens don't stay as healthy as the Reds stayed. I mean, Diaz, Sims, Jabot, Farmer, they were pretty much healthy the entire season, and that's not normal. Your relievers are the ones who constantly are getting hurt. So I kind of expect maybe that is what swings back, and that could be a concern. That might be, the one piece. Right now we're going into spring training, and people are worried, oh my gosh, Fernando Cruz isn't going to be left off the opening day roster. And I'm like, there'll be spots, but there is that depth to where guys like Cruz and Antone aren't guaranteed a bullpen spot. But I think that's the one spot where I could see all this depth right now. By the time we get into May and June, that is completely gone. And they're having to call up some guys to just fill those back end of the bullpen spots that we're not even anticipating right now. So I'm not really worried about it too much with the starting rotation. I'm not really worried about it too much with position players. But I think the bullpen would be the one. It just feels like almost the pendulum is just bound to kind of swing back the other way there.
Yeah. I'm not worried about Cruz. The other thing, too, is listen, they can say whatever they want, and they might not value spring training a ton, but if Fernando Cruz goes out and shoves during spring training, he was one of their high leverage arms at the end of the year. I'm not worried about all of that. It'll all sort itself out.
The problem, though, is your bullpen right now. Alexis Diaz and Sam Moll are the only ones that have options. Pagan, Sims, Jabot, Suter, Farmer, none of those guys have options.
Farmer.
And just, well, I mean, we can scoff at Farmer, but the Reds did actually sign him to a big league contract for, I think, $1.2 million. I just have a hard time believing the Reds are going to sign a guy to a $1.2 million contract. And unless he's completely awful in spring and just looks lost, I have a hard time not seeing him get on the roster, even if it is sacrificing a guy like Cruz or Antone that has options just to keep him and try to get through the season. But yeah. I don't think it's going to be a problem. I would be shocked if there's not a spot for Fernando Cruz at the end of spring.
Well, we'll find out. That's the good news. Spring training, there was people asking. We do plan to go out to spring training. I'm trying to work out some details on that right now with a couple brands, trying to make sure that we're not losing money when we go out there. So we'll keep you up to date on kind of what that looks like. The goal is to go out there, do our best to cover as much Reds spring training as we possibly can, and then head back. So. The good news is the two dates that two of the dates that we plan to be out there for are the prospect games. So I don't know how many people seen that during the offseason, but MLB, for those that don't know, they decided they wanted to have each of the teams in Major League Baseball have a day during spring training where they had to put their top prospects on the field against another organization's top prospects, and they would obviously play in a game. The Reds, luckily, just because math has to math, and they needed a team to play twice. I think there's 2 teams in Major League Baseball that had to play twice, and the Reds are one of them. They play the Rangers off the top of my head. This is off the top of my head. They play the Rangers, I believe, and they also play the Indians, I believe. Don't hold me to that, but I do know they play 2 prospect games, and the goal is to be out there for both of those. More or less, listen, when we got to spring training, we obviously want to cover the big league guys as much as we possibly can as well, and keep everybody updated. And we know that, hey, essentially, if it's not getting live streamed or if it's not obviously broadcasted on Valley from a spring training perspective, then maybe we go rogue and I say rogue in a general sense, but we go out there and we try to make sure that we get live at bats of obviously the top guys, and then we can share those so people get to see what those at bats look like. But more importantly, I guess is what I'm getting at, is that we want to try to make sure that we cover as many of these guys that are up and coming that really never get covered, and you never get good quality video of them playing for the most part. And we'll try to get as many interviews as we possibly can as well, if that's a thing. But we at this time, at least up to my knowledge, I know Nick maybe more privy to this information than me. At least to this knowledge, we're up in the air on kind of where we stand with some of that. But that's the plan for spring training for those that are asking.
I do have one other kind of fun, interesting topic. I saw Alex point this out in the chat. I know a lot of people, this has been a concern going into the year, is the concern about the lack of center field depth. I don't know if I share that same concern as everyone else. Obviously, I'm a big believer in TJ Friedl. I think Stuart Fairchild is fine as the backup, but I also think that like Jacob Hurtubise, I just don't think his floor is very low. Like, I think if he has to come up and play center field for a while, I think he's going to be fine. And then Blake Dunn as well has more upside. I think there's a lot more depth there, and it might not be players that have major league experience, but I think there's more depth there than it might be perceived.
Listen, I think TJ Friedl is as big of an X factor as anybody on this team. He's as big of a question mark as there anybody is on this team. I'd say he's just as big of a question mark to me as Tyler Stevenson. And oddly enough, in the chat, John points out it's kind of funny how last season at this time, we were talking about how Tyler Stevenson was going to be a 3-hole hitter, and he's going to be the anchor in this lineup, and that is, to a certain extent, that's where you try to temper your expectations on everything to a certain extent, because you just know inevitably, looking back at all the things that you thought were going to happen, inevitably never actually end up happening at all. And last year's a perfect example of all that, in a positive way, by the way. In fact, if we want to kind of reminisce on what we were talking about last year to now to this year, is, a lot of what our conversations surrounded themselves around was, let's just hope that these young guys come up and they get a lot of opportunities, and we get a chance to kind of see who they are and what they do. And at the end of the year, we're not super excited because Will Myers had a career year. We're not super excited that, and again, I don't mean to keep bringing his name up and making fun, but like even the Nick Senzel or, I don't know, Kirk Casale. Now, these all might be laughable names that I'm saying right now. Kevin Newman. If those guys had career years, if you can call it that, it'd be a lot more disappointing, because ultimately, yeah, it's great that they helped the Reds out, but we know that's not a part of the future. The good news is we got everything we wanted last year. We really did. I mean, if you could have laid out last season the way that it went down, outside of making the postseason, yes, which is absurd to say because we were expected to win 64 and a half games. I don't want to say 65 because that's not doing it justice. They're supposed to win 64 and a half games, and we're sitting here and we had the opportunity, like it or not, to get to the postseason, and it didn't happen. But they were right there, so it went about as perfect as it could, Nick.
Well, you could check the tape. I know I said I think you kind of shared the sentiment. I think our biggest hope for the year was that we figured out what we have. And the Reds pretty well figured out what they have. Now, look, there's still questions about like Noelvi Marte, but we were hoping you didn't get to the end of the year and you're like, well, maybe Matt McLean's a big leaguer. Maybe Will Benson's a big leaguer. Maybe Ellie, like these guys all at least have proven to this point that they're big leaguers. We don't have any of those questions. And so that was the biggest, I think, goal was for me at least, was just being able to sort these guys out. And I feel like that piece of it went way farther than I ever even really could have realistically hoped going into the year.
Yeah. Reds and 4 brought bad news into the chat. He said Kurt Casale has signed with the Miami Marlins. So at least, for Kurt and his family, congratulations to him. I'm sure living in Miami could be a slight upgrade than having to be in Cincinnati as a third string catcher. You want to put odds on whether or not Kurt Casale makes the opening day roster for the Marlins?
Their catching situation was bad last year. I mean, you think Tyler Stevenson was a bad hitter last year? Whew. Kurt
I didn't say he was a bad hitter. I said that the combination between what he was doing at the plate to what he was doing behind the plate was the problem.
Yeah. How about the Nationals? How about the Reds possibly opening up with Nick Senzel and Jesse?
I'm a little worried about that, if we're being honest. I'm a little worried about Nick Senzel. Nick Senzel, like it or not, is a good revenge player. I've actually never seen a player be on the same team as his team and hit a revenge home run against his team. I've never actually seen that happen. And Nick Senzel did it. He was the first player in Major League history to hit a revenge home run against the actual team that he was playing for, not against. Usually you got those fat slobs named Mike Moustakis who come into town and they just somehow, with their big old round belly like Santa Claus, find a way to poke their bat out there and hit one over the fence, and that happened to us. Let's not forget. Mike Moustakis hits a home run. That's usually how it goes down. Nick Senzel, where was that? I believe that was in Kansas City, right? That was in Kansas City?
It was Arizona.
Arizona. Was it Arizona? It was it. Was it Arizona? It was Arizona. You're going to be better than me at remembering this. Was it Arizona?
I'm pretty sure it was Arizona.
Chat, help us out. Washington. No, I don't know. Who knows? Nobody knows what it was. Anyways, chat will figure this out. I guarantee it. Alex Wallace right in the chat immediately. Arizona, to be clear. Arizona. Sorry that my brain's just mush. But that was a big time home run. And boy, he looked like he was just pissed running around the bases. I wish you'd have gave the double bird straight to David Bell on the way in. That would have been the highlight of the season.
I could feel it. I mean, he didn't have to give it. You could sense that it was there. Yeah, that's a good point on Senzel. I don't know. I mean, maybe I should be a little more worried about Winker. He didn't. The Reds played him a lot last year, and I wasn't ever too worried. I mean, I think my biggest fear is can he draw a walk? But Nick Senzel, it would not shock me the least bit if he has 7 extra base hits in that 3-game series.
Does Nick Senzel get a faint cheer when he comes to the plate? Does he get booed? What happens? Does nothing happen?
I think he gets a cheer. I think he gets a cheer. I think Winker gets a cheer. I think the only player that's not going to get a cheer is Mike Moustakis if he hasn't retired yet. But yeah, I don't know why anyone would boo Nick Senzel. That'd be kind of weak sauce in my opinion.
Even better questions in the chat. Any of these guys going to get a video board tribute before they step up to the plate?
Well, yeah, Senzel already got one last year, didn't he?
No, he got it in the offseason on social media. I'm talking about when you walk up to the plate and you're like
Winker got one. Yeah, he'll get a tribute. They already have that on file. I mean, that's just
yeah. You're right. Yeah, they don't even need to make it up. They just need to rerun the clip. Fair enough. Yeah. All right. All right. Anything else to get to here on your end before you want to jump into Chris Welsh, obviously, and his conversations, and then after that we can get into some chat questions. So anything that you want to kind of talk about before we get to Chris?
No, I'm good. If you guys got any questions in the chat, during the Chris Welsh interview, throw it in there. We'll try to get to it when it's done. So stick around. We'll hang out a little bit more afterwards. It's about 15 minutes.
All right. This is Nick talking to Chris Welsh, the legendary man that has become known relatively of recent on X.com. All over. All the big platforms picked it up. Tried to pick a guy off 17 times, and he ended up stealing on the very next pitch on the 18th attempt when he decided to go to the plate. And that's a fun fact about Chris Welsh. But here's Nick and Chris's interview.
All right, joined now by Chris Welsh, who is live in Goodyear, Arizona on the Day Pitchers and Catchers Report. Chris, how's the vibes down in Goodyear?
Well, the vibe, I guess, is the same way it's been all winter long, Nick. People are excited about this ball club. I had some conversations with some of the top decision makers yesterday, and they're very happy with the way the winter went, considering what was out there and what they were able to spend and who they got, and certainly who they're bringing back, the young players, looking for them to take the next step. That's probably the biggest thing that I think that everybody's going to be excited about.
So, talking about the new players, Emilio Pagan, Nick Martinez, Frankie Montas, what's your initial impressions of those guys?
I think those were all good deals, to be honest with you. Let's go to Montas first. I've not seen Montas yet. That's one of the reasons I came over here today. Now, keep in mind the position players have not officially reported yet. So behind me, there's some batting practice going on. Ellie De La Cruz was in the cage. I think Nick Martini was in the cage, a couple of other guys. Those guys are just kind of here early to kind of get into the flow of things. But I've not seen Montas. I know he's around here somewhere. I'll run him down. But from what I've talked to, I talked to Derek Johnson, the pitching coach, and talked to Nick Krall a little bit, and other people. They're excited about him. They think that, he's going to be healthy. And if he's healthy, he's going to be able to put up the kind of numbers he did previously in his career. And I think that at his age, he's probably looking for one more big contract. And this is a year in which he's motivated to try to get out there and get after it. The other guys I haven't met either, except for Pagan. I did meet him yesterday. Very nice young man. I liked his approach to pitching. He talked a little bit about his stuff. And Martinez I've not seen, but I understand that he's one guy that's going to be very important to this pitching staff.
The three guys going into last year, pitching-wise, that the Reds had such high expectations for, some good moments, some tough moments, especially injury-wise. What do you think Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo, and Graham Ashcraft have to do to take that next step this season?
They have to learn how to pitch. And remember that it's more and more difficult in today's game for a pitcher to come up out of the minor leagues knowing how to pitch. Because if you think how pitchers are being evaluated in the minor leagues, it's not on their performances. It used to be, way back in the day that, your win-loss record, your earned run average, how many strikeouts you'd have, those were the indicators. How many innings you would pitch, how many times you would get yourself out of trouble once you got into trouble. Those are the things that evaluators use to determine whether a guy is ready for the big leagues or not. Now, you're being evaluated by the analytics that are on an iPad. Did you get your spin rate? Is your BAA right? What about your breaking pitch? Is it the right spin at the right speed? If you're trying to throw a slurve or something like that, are you doing the things that we're trying to get you to do from the analytics department? And that's why you're seeing so many pitchers come up in the major leagues now with great stuff, but have no idea how to read hitters, how to set guys up. And the other thing about that is that very rarely do you see in the minor leagues pitchers allowed to work themselves out of jams in the fifth or sixth inning. Because once you get to 75 pitches, they're down there looking at the bullpen, and so is the manager. The manager doesn't want to be blamed for hurting arms, so he's going to get guys out of there. But the problem with that is you don't learn how to get out of a jam. You don't learn what it's like to face a guy the third time in the order. You just learn about your stuff. So these young pitchers that you just mentioned have to learn about themselves. They have to learn what it takes to get a guy out in a pressure situation. They have to learn what happens when a guy is late on the fastball or early on the breaking ball, how you go ahead and bury it on him. And those are the things that come with experience. And it's not always easy. It's not always a direct line. But the guys that you just mentioned and those top three young prospects are really good. And they've got a chance to be able to figure that out in a hurry.
So there's one guy that's got a little bit of publicity this offseason. I know he's kind of become a StatCast guy that people have kind of gone to, and that's Fernando Cruz and his splitter. What was your thoughts on him, a guy that kind of barely made the opening day roster and then at times last year was really dominant?
I've always liked Cruz because one way that I scout pitchers is I watch the hitter. And I'll sit rather than right behind home plate because I can get all that information on StatCast. But I'll sit along the sideline, maybe, from the dugout view and see whether a hitter is on time or not. If a hitter is on time, he's seeing the ball well. It doesn't matter whether you throw 100 miles an hour or not. If he's fouling it straight back with great swings, then you better mix it up a little bit. Cruz has the ability to go extremes, low to mid 90s in his fastball. And then that filthy, it's not even a split finger. It's more of a knuckling forkball where he crams that ball all the way back in the V between his index finger and his middle finger. And that comes out of there. Sometimes it tumbles. Sometimes it spins from side to side like a ball that'll just sink unnaturally. And, as long as he throws strikes, he's shown that he's got perseverance. I mean, I love his story. I love the guy as an individual, and he's easy to root for.
So, Chris, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at the Reds roster and the pitchers that are coming to camp and realize there's more pitchers than there's roster spots. What do you think about the competition this spring that really we haven't seen in a long time from the Reds pitching staff?
You're right. I mean, the competition with good pitchers. I mean, I've been around here so long. I remember the Reds would come to camp and they're looking for 3 starters out of basically the bottom pile somewhere. And now you've got pitchers that have had big league experience. You got 10 of them, I think, in camp that could be starters that have big league experience. So that's really an edge up on a lot of other ball clubs. Reds realize that they have to develop their own talent, and they're on a high tide right now. So I think that's very important. But at the same time, we're going to see, and we're going to hear this word more this year than ever before, options. Those pitchers and players that have options are easy to send out. You're not going to lose them to another ball club. So whenever there's a tough decision to be made by a front office, they're going to take the easiest way out. And that is make sure that we keep the player that we send down to the minor leagues and that we don't lose somebody through a waiver claim that we really like. And you're going to see that crunch time all the way down. And I would suggest that it doesn't matter how some of these guys pitch in spring training, if they've got options left, they're going to be down in AAA.
Chris, what do you think about that? Sometimes maybe sacrificing a couple weeks or at a time while you're maybe almost waiting for the inevitable injury to happen, where you kind of have a lesser pitcher. Can you tolerate that? Because I know some baseball fans, man, that really irks them.
I think a bigger mistake is making decisions based on spring performances. I mean, you're looking at me right now. I was a Hall of Fame spring training pitcher, I can tell you. When I came in as a non-roster player with the Reds, I gave up back-to-back doubles to the first 2 batters I faced. One of them was Billy Beane, by the way, and I probably should have quit right then and there. But then I went on to pitch another, 15 innings and did not allow a batter to reach second base. Didn't walk a batter all spring. I mean, I was the best pitcher in camp, and I was the last guy cut when Mario Soto was able to make his start, the opening day start. They go ahead and they sent me down to minor league. So I think that one of the biggest mistakes you can do is base your judgment on the quality of a player on what he does down here in March, because it is so different here in March. You see veteran hitters are trying to get their ABs in. They're not grinding out at bats. You're not playing in situations where you have to get a guy out. You're pitching and playing for yourself, not necessarily the good of the ball club, because wins and losses don't mean anything. So don't get wrapped up in the month of March, because, let's go through. And I think this is something right up your alley. You could go back to the last 5 or 6 years, maybe 10 years, and find out who the best hitter in camp was every year. And I'd love to see that list of names, because half these guys are probably out selling hush puppies right now.
So, Chris, what young pitchers maybe, I know this is only the first day of camp, but what young pitchers have maybe really impressed you the most?
It's hard for me to tell you anybody who's not been in the big leagues, because I haven't seen these young pitchers except on video. I go really more by what coaches and scouts tell me on some of these guys, but I do like to see them in spring training. But the guys I saw in the big leagues last year that were very impressive to me, Hunter Green, obviously, he's got great stuff. He's got to learn how to pitch. That's bottom line there. He's got too good of stuff to get hit around, and I think that he's going to be better and better the more experience he gets. I think that Abbott was exceptional last year. I think he's got a very high ceiling. Ashcraft has got a chance to be another Corbin Burns in my mind. I mean, those are three guys right there. And I wouldn't look past a pitcher like Williamson. I love his changeup. I love his nice, easy delivery where the ball just kind of comes out of his hand as a surprise to the hitters. And then he's got that changeup to follow up. It's got really nice diving action. And he's got great action on his arms with it because he sells it like a fastball. So those are the three guys that jump out at me. And I'm not I'm overlooking a whole bunch of other pitchers as well. But those are the guys I think that'll be most interested to watch. Lodolo obviously has got to be in that mix because we missed him almost all of last year. He's got to figure out a way to stay healthy. And, if they are healthy, they've got a chance to be really good.
You mentioned Lodolo. What's the mental hurdle that maybe a guy like Lodolo has to go through after kind of having so many he's had a lot of really small injuries. He's had some blisters, had a few things with his shoulder, but what's the mental side of it getting into spring training for him?
I think he's got to have confidence that he's 100% and he can cut it loose. And I don't mean only cutting it loose on his fastball. I mean cutting it loose all the time. When he's doing his infield drills, fire that ball across the infield. When he's, throwing his breaking pitch in the game, I mean, really get on it, not just flip it up there because maybe in the back of your mind you're thinking you're going to hurt yourself one way or another. So you can't play this game with fear. There's an old saying in baseball that if you're scared, go get a dog. And he can't play the game with fear. Neither can anyone else, and the best players don't.
All right, you mentioned it. Elly De La Cruz was already at camp. How's Elly look?
He looks bigger than he did last year. I think the kid's still growing, to be honest with you. Here's a tip for you that I heard, and I was just watching him. I'm not sure if he's in the batting cage right now or not. He's not. I'm not sure where Elly went. But I can tell you that you're going to see a different swing from Elly De La Cruz this year. You're not going to see the leg lift. He's worked this winter at kind of being a little bit more quiet with his front side, and that's going to help him stay back a little bit because that was the big problem for Elly. His ability to kind of go to and fro with speed pitches and then slow pitches. They got him thinking about the slow stuff, and they throw the fastball by him. They get him thinking about the fastball, and then he dropped that slow curveball on him. So it's a matter of adjustment for Elly. Young kid, great stuff, and talent obviously. But you will definitely see a difference right away in his approach, especially with his leg lift.
All right, I'm sure the people want to know what other position players are already there.
Well, I'm seeing right now the coach, the infield coach, Jeff Pickler. I'll turn this thing around, and as I walk over to here, field number 2, and you'll see Pickler. I think Matt McClain is out there. I saw Encarnacion Strand, but here's McClain out there taking some ground balls around the bag. And it's kind of interesting, I think that they've got McClain penciled in to be an everyday second baseman, but they also realize that, guys like De La Cruz are going to need some time off. So, will McClain, who's a natural shortstop, run over there to shortstop when Elly De La Cruz gets a day off? And who fills in at second base when McClain gets a day off? Where is India going to play? Is he going to play a little second base in the infield? He may play some first base. They can play some outfield. And then you've got Candelario. So that's the whole, Pandora's box that I just opened about playing time and players and how many you got and how many can play at one time and so on. I do feel as an old school guy that you need to give some lineup consistency where players know when they're going to play and who they're going to play against. It can't be a constant manipulation of matchups every game of the year where a player doesn't know until maybe the night before whether he's playing or not. So I think that, in my mind, here's what managers need to do. Superstars give you great talent and great production all year long. But the superstars are only about 5% of the population of Major League Baseball. The rest of the guys in the middle of the pack will give you about 4 months out of 6 months. Really good baseball. They're really good for 4. They're really bad for 2. The challenge for the manager is to figure out when those 2 are going to happen and get them the hell out of the lineup.
All right, Chris. Well, you are the absolute best. Thank you for giving us a sneak peek behind the scenes at Goodyear, Arizona, here on the opening day of camp. Chris, take care. We'll catch up with you again soon.
Always great to talk with you, Nick. Good luck to you.
Muted.
Good. Now, I just want to make sure I didn't chime in there and make a fool of myself, and here I am making a fool of myself on the back end. But that was the interview there with Chris Welsh and our very own Nick Kirby. There's a couple things he said there that were relatively somewhat interesting, I guess. He obviously made a little bit of I wouldn't call it bold, but a little bit of a statement towards the platooning of guys and certainly the matchups that David Bell has shown that he utilizes on a pretty regular basis. And he kind of said, hey, listen, there needs to be some consistency with these guys in certain spots to where they know that they're going to be penciled into the lineup no matter what. And they think the reality is, though, Nick, are you that concerned about that? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, there's only so many guys on this team that are probably going to be quote-unquote platoon players. In your mind, who are those guys going to be, if you had to guess, that would be a starter or a regular, consistent starter for this club?
TJ Friedel, Candelario, De La Cruz, Marte, and CES.
McLean.
Yeah, did I say McLean? Yeah, Friedel, McLean, Ellie, Candelario, CES, and Marte. Everyone else is kind of mix and match. I'm not saying those guys won't get a day off, but I think the other guys will be more platooning depending on health. But I mean, if there's an injury, Jonathan Indy's probably playing every day. If there's not an injury, Jonathan Indy's probably platooning. And the one thing you've seen with David Bell is, and especially in modern baseball, is pitchers don't go very deep in the game. So just because Jonathan Indy is starting on the bench and Jake Fraley's starting, Jonathan Indy might come in the 4th inning to pinch hit for him, and then he plays the rest of the game. And it's nice to have players like Jonathan Indy or Spencer Steer if they're platooning, and on the opposite side, Jake Fraley and Will Benson, because if they come in, they're a bona fide big league player. It's not a cute little platoon matchup, right? Like Kevin Newman and Nick Senzel were quality as against left-handed pitching, but if you saw righty, right, it's over. That's not the case with India. India and Steer are going to give you really quality at bats against right-handed pitching, and that's a real weapon that I think you can have.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt that obviously guys like the two that you just mentioned with Newman and Senzel, if you got stuck, and stuck's the word that I'd like to use, where you got stuck at the end of a game where you've already kind of exhausted your pinch hit options and you're just left with them because that's all you got left, and you don't want to use your third catcher because obviously you have to have a catcher as a kind of a saving grace there if one of those guys were to get hurt. They have to hit against right-handed pitching. You feel terrible about it. Some of these guys you don't feel horrible about, at least. The only other guy I could think of where I'm just not sure, and I'm not throwing in the towel on Will Benson, lefty on lefty, quite yet. Jake Fraley, I think you've convinced me of. I think I'm there. So if a lefty's going against Jake Fraley, I think that's probably not good for the Cincinnati Reds. But ultimately, you're right. They have quality big league players that are going to kind of insert themselves into the game later in the game if they do get platooned or they decide to go with matchups. All right, chat questions, fire away. One quick plug that I have to make is, as always, likes usually equal wins. That's how this works on this stream. Right now, we got a significant amount of people watching, and I know we do this every time. People probably tired of hearing us saying it. Thank you for watching our show. Thank you for supporting us. Please pass along if you ever around group of friends or whatever. You just let them know, hey, there's these guys that go live. They're kind of idiots. They go live after every single Reds game, and you might enjoy it. Check it out. And who knows? We slowly build this community. It's good to see all the usual names, the OG names in the chat as always, and some new names. We got some new names as well. But as always, if you don't know, likes equal wins. But now Alex, our good friend Alex, says likes equal Blake Snell signing. Now I'm not going to go that far, but who knows? You never know. I mean, do you want to do your part? Do you want to do your part? All you got to do is hit the little thumbs up button, and you did your part. We can't blame it on the chat if we don't get Blake Snell, if we get a bunch of likes. What's a realistic goal here? We got 56 right now. We got 120 watching. 75? Is it fair to get 75? That's 20 more. Just hit the like button. Some chat questions. I don't know if you've been paying attention, Nick. Do you see any that jumped out to you?
Over under 7.5 ejections for David Bell.
Under.
Yeah, I'm on the under too. I know we both humble brag, got to interview Coach Bell.
Yeah. He's not proud of that. He's not proud of that. Like he genuinely was like kind of disgusted by the fact that not at us. He wasn't mad at us for bringing it up. He just kind of was like, really? He's like, I've got ejected that many times. I don't mean to get ejected. So actually, now that I think about it, I did a little reverse psychology brain trick there in my mind. Maybe that means that he just can't control it. He has no clue about it. It's subliminal to him to where he's going to go over. So I think I'm switching my pick to over.
It might be like a complete like zombie just takeover
right.
thing, because I'm with you. But I don't know if he doesn't get ejected all year, you can put it 100% on us for bringing it up, for heckling him about it, and I don't know if that's good or not. It's in a long season, you need those. It's entertaining.
Yeah. No, I mean, you need to break up the monotony from time to time. And he had told me, and again, I'll have to reach out and see if we can't get the audio, obviously, from the interview that I did. But he had mentioned during the interview that that he can confidently say he has not one time tried to purposely get ejected in the game. And that seems crazy to me. When you've been ejected that many times, you mean to tell me there wasn't one time where you just said, I'll keep it a kid's show. There wasn't one time where you just looked around and you just said, you know what I'm thinking. And you just walk out there and you got hell to pay and you're ready to let them know. I feel like he has at least done that one time.
You can't tell me the Pittsburgh Pirates in 2019, some of those ejections weren't premeditated. I don't believe that.
Yeah. Other question that I had seen that I thought was a little funny was that where was that at? Who said that? I can't keep up with our chat anymore. I don't know. I lost it. Not a good look for me.
We got one more of a comment, really good comment from Joshua Mouse. I haven't seen you in the chat before. Thanks for joining us, Joshua. Talking about Reds needing to get off to a good start, and yeah, that's something I've been looking. I think it's the first 22 games of the year. They play the Nationals, the Angels, and the White Sox in that stretch, and then they have like almost a 2-month stretch where it's almost every team is a team that you're expecting to be in playoff contention. So, I mean, look, we saw the Reds sweep the Houston Astros. We saw the Reds get swept by the Washington Nationals. So baseball is not necessarily a game, especially over small individual series, where you can say better team always wins. But I think you obviously will be feeling a lot better, even if you get through that first 22 game stretch at like 12-10. If you start off really slow, you start off, I don't know, you win 7 or 8 games, and then you got that daunting schedule ahead. That's when you could get yourself into a little bit of trouble. So definitely something to keep an eye on. But it's the first 22 games of the season, and you also hope though too, Trace, not to belabor this point, but
yeah,
you hope too, like you're playing like the Chicago White Sox. How many times have you seen these really awful teams have one good month of the season and it be April? Like we've seen it with the Reds, like in, I think it was 2017, they started like 22-17 or something like that, and they were
Pirates.
awful.
Pirates. I mean, everybody wants to act like the Pirates were terrible last year. Well, they were pretty damn good in April. I know that, and they were leading this division at one point by, I think, was it 4 or 5 games? And I mean, certainly everybody kind of said, well, let's just wait until the end of the season and see what happens. But the thing is that it goes both ways, though. It goes both ways. Is that most of these teams are healthy at the beginning of the year, right? You don't have a situation like where you run up against the Reds and you got 3 guys throwing that you'd never heard of before, and then later in the year, like it or not, whether you want to say that these guys are worthwhile, but you run up against the Reds at a different point in the year, and you got guys like Hunter Green, Ashcraft, and maybe Abbott throwing against you instead of, I'm not gonna. I keep saying names, and it's just like I feel like I'm just piling on people, so I won't mention any of the guys that we had. They all did their best, but and I shouldn't bring Kennedy up. He did an excellent job, but when you got a guy like Kennedy on the mound versus Hunter Green, a little bit of a difference. One quick funny. David Brown obviously brings up. He said the over-under on the gastritis ILs this year. I'm taking the under on that too, David. I'll tell you why. For those that don't know, Billy Epler got suspended for the rest of the entire season. He got suspended for the entire season. For those that don't know, this is a New York general manager gets suspended for the entire season of baseball by Rob Manfred because why? He was manipulating the IL. I'll tell you what, don't come sniffing around Cincinnati. We don't do any of that. I don't think we do any of that at all. But by sniffing, I mean that as a pun. You know what I'm saying? All I'm saying is that I don't think the rest of Major League Baseball, they got the memo, right? If there was anything that was taught or said, Rob Manfred said, listen, you guys want to play this game? We'll play this game. He's done for the rest of the season. Anyone else that wants to do this throughout the rest of the league, here's the memo email I'm going to send out to everybody. Don't do it. If you're going to do it and we investigate you and it looks like you're tampering, you're done. So, honestly, somewhat kudos to Rob Manfred for that. Because listen, if you have the IL and you have a 40-man roster, you can't manipulate it. It's there for a reason. So, I'm going to take the under on that. I don't think we're going to have any more phantom ILs this year.
I got some other good ones. Over under 6.5 longest win streak. And I think Maxwell's like right on. I think that is typically like the cut line for most season is like you're normally you'll have, like 6 is your highest or 7's your highest. I'm going to take over. I just think this team's probably going to be streaky again. I think I'd probably take the over on maybe a 7-game losing streak too. I would be shocked if there's a 7-8-9 win streak, a 7-8-9 losing streak. The pitching is the one thing that maybe you can avoid that long losing streak this year.
Let's hope, man. Let's hope. This year is filled with so many like, there can't be that many more seasons that we have ahead of us with the group that we have, the foundation that we have, to where you genuinely going into the year, if the best version that we all perceive to have of these guys plays, we will win 100 games and we'll win the World Series. Like, and I know people be like, oh, someone might clip that and be like, oh, they're going to take it out of context. Okay. And that's fine. If you want to be a hater, go ahead. I don't care. I really don't. That's fine. But my point is this. If Elly De La Cruz plays to the peak of his ability, if TJ Friedel plays to his peak, if Hunter Green, Lodolo, Ashcraft, Abbott, Williamson, Diaz, you name every single one of a player on our team. Let's just say, for instance, almost all of these guys play to the top of their ability. This is an elite team. There's not many holes. They can run. They got frontline starters. They got a back-end bullpen that's really, really, really good. They got guys that have some pop, obviously, but then more importantly, they're just young and athletic. The only spot that you're not going to convince me on, and I'm not going to do it because, again, I'm trying to keep this a nice show, but there's this little thing called home plate. Somebody surrounds that area. maybe they play the peak of their ability. It'll be good too. But my point is, you could convince me they win 100 games and win the World Series. If all these guys play to their floor, you could convince me they win 72 games. And that's call it scary, call it whatever you want. I call it exciting.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk, recently about the projections, and I don't really have an overall like, oh my God, these projections are awful. Come at them with pitchforks. I think the Zips. I do not understand some of their projections for the Reds pitching. Like every pitcher's like a below average pitcher. Seems like there's something wrong there. But the team last year, there was just so many things that went so right for the Reds, but there was also so many things that went wrong for the Reds. Like the Reds had an incredible record in one-run games. When you go 34-29 and you had a negative run differential, that's pretty fortunate. So it's hard to repeat that. The Reds were great on the road last year, 44-37. Hard to repeat that. And then the bullpen health, I talked about that already. Hard to repeat that, but starting pitching health was awful. Like right. Green, Ashcraft, and Lodolo, like you expected to get more out of them. You had a whole month in April where you had a roster that was just really filler guys at that point. The Reds were 38-43 at home last year. You would expect that's going to be better. And especially, when there's going to be more energy in the ballpark this year. How much that's worth in baseball, we'll wait and see. But there's so many things that you expect some things to bounce back. You expect some things to go the other way. And then, like you just mentioned, Elly De La Cruz is just scratching the surface. If he's the Elly De La Cruz that I believe he could be, and Hunter Green, either one of those guys, because those are two players that legitimately could be the best player in the sport at their position. And I don't think that's a stretch. Will they? We don't know, but they have that possibility. So that's just, I'm just excited to have the games get started because I don't really know exactly how it's going to play out throughout the season.
Correct. And I mean, if anything, they brought some life back to a franchise for all intents and purposes many people have checked out on. And, just, not speaking directly about this show, but let's be honest. Just this show in and of itself proves and shows what type of excitement surrounds this team. And because ultimately last year, when I was at the Brass Band Festival and Stuart Fairchild was out there, getting 5 at-bats a game and was hitting in the 3-hole, I was ready to pack up the bags with some of those blue band festivals and just hit the road with them and carry their bags for them if I needed to and call it a day. That's where I was at. And next thing you know, 2 months later, we were slamming beers back and we were having a good time. So who knows? Who knows where this season will take us? But ultimately, at the end of the day, we that's the best part about being a fan, Genuinely. The best part about being a fan is certainly having the excitement post a huge win, right? Like if the Reds were to win a World Series, and I hope that I get to experience that, obviously. I can only imagine the feeling. But sometimes, similar to vacation, the analogy of the day that you have to get on Chatterbox Reds with Trace is like sometimes looking forward to vacation is just as like exciting and entertaining as actually being on the trip itself, right? And I'm not suggesting that hope is the only thing that you can enjoy with this franchise, but what I am saying is like I'm relishing in this a little bit. Like I'm just like wake up and we're one day closer from opening day and being able to sit back and watch the beautiful broadcast that is Bally's for one more season, and then hopefully for whatever it is, we find a way to get some solidify the question marks that we have. That way, moving forward, there's no more what ifs anymore. And I know people are going to think we're moving the goalpost when I say this. I'll say this. It's unfair to have solidified expectations on almost any of these guys right now of what you expect them to be. we can all hope that there's somebody. But all of these rookies, we don't really know what the back of their baseball card is. Next season or towards the end of the season, we're going to have a pretty damn good clue whether these guys were fluke players or whether they're the real deal. And I believe, and this is where I get excited, I do genuinely believe that the vast majority of these guys are real deal players. I will be shocked if Matt McClain is not a dude. I will be shocked if Noelvi Marte is not a dude. Ellie De La Cruz, dude. CES, serviceable. Will he be a 40, 50 run 50 home run hitter? I'm just saying, if CES isn't an all-star in the next 4 to 5 years, that's okay to me if he's serviceable in what we want him to be. What happens at catcher? I don't know, but it can only go up for the most part for me in my perspective. And then we'll figure out the outfield. That's my biggest concern. My biggest concern is what happens in the outfield. God's honest truth. And I don't know what to make of the pitchers, but they have so many of them that I just figured it's going to work itself out.
Yeah, I'm fascinated to see what the outfield looks like in spring training, who's playing, where and how all that goes. And
right.
Is Jonathan India a legitimate outfielder, or is he like a DH, plays a little bit of second base? Is he playing at first base? Because that was thrown out too. I'm fascinated to see what they do with Jonathan India this spring. Every single day when the lineup comes out, I'm going to be, where's Jonathan India at? That's probably one of the more fascinating things to watch.
Yeah. Anything left to add before we do the division preview?
No, that's I feel good. I feel good. This is.
You feel complete.
We're getting closer. We're getting closer.
We're almost there.
Yeah.
All right. So division previews. You obviously had a discussion with whom. When's it coming out? Where can we watch it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
so I'm gonna start some division previews with some folks from each of the NL Central teams, somewhat associated with them. Started off really, really good. So good start. We got Jeff Levering. He is the TV play-by-play guy for the Milwaukee Brewers. Pretty much replaced Brian Anderson, who only does like 15 games a year now. But yeah, really cool interview. Awesome guy. He was on the call for Xavier Villanova, and our good old pal Paul Fritchner helped set that up for me. So yeah, yes. I'm gonna put that up on Thursday. That'll be in your podcast feed, and then also probably debut it on YouTube after Off the Bench with Trace Fowler. And then I'll be looking to do some for every team. So I'm working on scheduling that. I'll probably try to do maybe 1 a week or 2 a week up till spring training starts here in just a couple of weeks.
Fair enough. All right. Well, he mentioned it. Obviously, there is Off the Bench for myself. I am doing that role until it gets met or filled by somebody else. So that is a daily show Monday through Friday from 10 a to 12 p. And we talk about most things in Cincinnati. And I'll keep it running. Chatterbox Bearcats, as always, Chuck and Houdini do a great job. They need to play better basketball, for being honest, though. I mean, you can't turn the ball over 60 times in a basketball game and think that you're going to beat a top 10 team in the country on your home court, the same home court that you haven't beaten anybody all year. And it's becoming very, 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 very disheartening. It is. It just is. There's only so many times in my life do I want to go and watch two teams that are prideful programs in Cincinnati not make the NCAA tournament. Like it's a Red show. We'll keep it a Red show, but for somebody that's trying to tie the loose ends up, between the Bengals season and the Red season, it'd be really nice if we had a team in Cincinnati that could make the NCAA tournament. That'd be great. But maybe that's not in the cards. We'll find out. All right. Anything other? I don't think so. That's going to be it. As always, thank you very much for watching this show. Genuinely mean that. Many of you probably think that we're crazy for saying that over and over and over and over again, but I can't tell you how many times we turned the live on, and if it wasn't